The morning sun filtered through the long white curtains as Amara stood in the kitchen of the mansion she silently owned. She flipped akara in the frying pan while humming softly, her wrapper tied around her waist, and her headscarf neatly arranged. To the world, especially to her husband's family, she was simply the wife, the woman married to Chike, a struggling entrepreneur trying to rise. But beneath her quiet demeanor lay a truth that no one in the house knew. Amara had used her own savings, inheritance from her late father, and strategic investment returns to buy this house, their home. The documents were hidden in a fireproof safe in her office, and the lawyer, Barrister Adalai, had strict instructions. Her name alone must remain on all property records. She didn't do it for power. She did it because she believed in building a safety net, in protecting what she worked for. But as she glanced toward the dining room and saw Mama Chike setting plates like she owned the place, Amara felt a tightening in her chest. This house, her house, no longer felt like home. Chike strolled down the stairs, dressed smartly in a well-ironed kaftan. He barely acknowledged Amara's greeting as he brushed past her toward the dining table. "Good morning, honey," she said, her voice soft. He mumbled back, already opening his phone. Mama Chike, seated at the table, shot Amara a glare before smiling sweetly at her son. "My son, eat. Your food will go cold. Your wife has been too busy with work to feed her husband well." Chike chuckled, but didn't respond. Amara sat across the table, hiding the sting. She had been working late nights to secure a logistics contract that would elevate their finances. It was a project that, if successful, would change Chike's life too, but no one ever asked what she was working so hard for. To them, she was just the barren, overly ambitious wife who was more loyal to her boss than to her home. And Chike, once loving and attentive, had grown distant since his mother moved in 6 months ago. He had become colder, more suspicious, less tender. Something had changed, and Amara couldn't put her finger on it. Not yet. Later that night, as Amara sat in the study going over shipping invoices, she overheard a soft conversation from the hallway. Mama Chike's voice, bitter and sharp, was speaking to someone on the phone. "My son is wasting his time with that woman, always working like a man, and still no child. No one knows where she goes or who she's with. I will not sit and watch my lineage end." Amara froze, her pen trembling. She stood and walked to the doorway, careful not to be seen. The whispers sliced through the hallway like a knife. That night, Amara lay awake beside a husband who no longer touched her, her heart heavy. She had built this home from the ground up. She had sacrificed everything for Chike's rise. But now she was beginning to see the cracks, and worse, she was starting to feel like a guest in her own house. The days that followed were laced with unease. Amara could feel the change in Chike like a cold draft in a once warm room. He no longer kissed her forehead before leaving for work, no longer asked about her projects, or even noticed when she didn't eat. The silence between them was now thick, but Mama Chike's words were loud and consistent. Every morning and night, she made small comments that cut deep under the skin, planting doubts in her son's heart. "Chike, don't you find it odd that your wife is always talking about business trips and contracts? A good woman stays with her husband. But you wouldn't know. You're too blind." Chike, already poisoned by suspicion, started replying with half-hearted nods and distant eyes. Amara noticed. She noticed how he started asking what time she'd returned before she even left, how he checked her phone casually, how he once asked, almost jokingly, if Chief Damien ever visited her after work. These were not his words. These were echoes of his mother's whispers. Amara tried. She cooked his favorite yam porridge, stayed home more, and even invited Chike for dinner dates. But each effort was met with avoidance or irritation. One night, as they lay in silence, she turned to him and said, "Chike, are you okay? We don't talk anymore. You act like I'm not even here." His response was brutal in its simplicity. "Maybe you're too busy with work to notice I'm slipping away." She sat up, wounded. "Is that what you believe? That I don't care?" He shrugged, scrolling through his phone. "I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is you're always with your boss, and I'm tired." That night, Amara didn't cry. She simply sat in the dark, realizing that the man she loved was being reshaped by his mother's bitterness, and that the war wasn't just for his attention, but for her place in this house. Behind her calm and smile, Amara was building emotional armor. She began keeping records of conversations, saving receipts, and revisiting the legal documents that made her sole owner of the mansion. She wasn't preparing for war, not yet, but she was preparing to protect her peace. Meanwhile, Mama Chaik had begun inviting distant relatives over for prayers and blessings, whispering to them, "We need a real woman in this home, one that can carry a child. Not all these modern girls with big titles and empty wombs." It was clear a storm was gathering, and Amara was surrounded by wolves in the very den she built with her own hands. The confrontation came on a Saturday, unplanned but explosive. Amara was returning from a site visit with Chief Damien, her mentor and business partner, who had helped her land a multi-million naira deal to expand her delivery network across Abuja and Lagos. As she stepped into the compound, her heels clicking against the tiled floor, she found Chaik waiting in the living room, arms folded, jaw clenched. Mama Chaik sat beside him, a handkerchief dramatically pressed to her chest like she was grieving. Amara smiled as she entered, oblivious to what was coming. "Good evening," she greeted. "Chaik, I brought you something from the warehouse. Your name is even in the—" "Where were you?" he interrupted. His voice was sharp, cold, accusatory. Amara blinked, surprised. "I told you. I had a site meeting in Garki with Chief Damien and the new suppliers. It was at 8 p.m., he snapped. "Is that what wives do now? Come home by 8 p.m. from a meeting with another man?" Amara's heart pounded. "Chaik, please. You know it was business. You know this deal is big for both of us. Don't lie to me," he shouted, slamming his hand against the armrest. Mama Chaik hissed beside him. "I warned you, my son. This woman is no good. She's disrespecting you under your roof." Amara stood still, shaken, but composed. "First of all, this is my house." She stopped herself. It wasn't time. Not yet. That night, Chaik slept in the guest room for the first time. Mama Chaik followed Amara around like a warden, watching every move she made, speaking to her in clipped, cold tones. Amara cried quietly in the bathroom, wondering how everything had shifted so fast. Just a year ago, Chaik held her hand through her father's funeral. Just a year ago, he thanked her for believing in him when he had nothing. Now he believed the worst of her. And worse, he believed his mother more than he believed his own wife. Amara didn't know what would come next. But something inside her, something fierce, began to awaken. If war was what they wanted, she would not only survive it, she would win it. The subtle erosion of Amara's mind and spirit began like a slow drip, almost unnoticeable at first, until it became a flood. Chaik's affection vanished, replaced by a quiet hostility that hung in the air like smoke after a fire. He no longer said good morning, and when he returned home, he barely looked in her direction. When she tried to engage him in conversation, he either ignored her or twisted her words. If she asked about his day, he called her clingy. If she was quiet, he accused her of withholding secrets. And in all of it, Mama Chaik was the puppeteer behind the curtain. She would whisper behind doors, just loud enough for Amara to hear. "A real wife knows her place," she'd say. "If it's not in the kitchen or in bed, then where is it?" These words cut deeper, because they weren't just said, they were believed. Chaik began echoing the same phrases, weaponizing them in arguments to justify his distance. "You're not a wife anymore. You're just a housemate in high heels," he once spat after she returned from a board meeting. Amara, exhausted and wounded, started to doubt herself. Maybe she was too focused on her career. Maybe she had failed to be a real woman. The emotional manipulation wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, calculated, and cruel, and it was breaking her piece by piece. What made it worse was how Chaik had started pretending to be the victim. In front of friends or visiting relatives, he would sigh dramatically, putting on a show of being the long-suffering husband. "You know how these corporate women are," he'd say, laughing with bitterness. No time for family, no respect for tradition. Amara would sit silently, burning on the inside, but too dignified to argue in public. She noticed how some of their mutual friends began to look at her differently, how the whispers started in church after Mama Chike made one too many prayer requests for her infertile daughter-in-law. At work, Amara wore her usual calm, commanding presence, but once in her car, she often broke down before driving home. The house no longer felt like a place of peace. It was a battlefield with no weapons except words, glances, and silence. Her meals were left untouched, her opinions dismissed. And every time she tried to explain herself, she was told she was too emotional, too paranoid, or too cold. It was a vicious cycle of being blamed for reacting to the pain she didn't cause. Chike had become a stranger, and the worst part was knowing he didn't even realize how far he had drifted, or perhaps he no longer cared. One rainy night, as thunder rumbled and the lights flickered, Amara stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her once bright eyes now looked hollow, rimmed with sleeplessness and betrayal. Her skin was pale from stress, her frame thinner than before. She whispered to herself, "I am not crazy. I am not unfaithful. I am not barren." But the walls around her told a different story. Mama Chike had claimed the guest room as her own and now controlled what was cooked, who visited, and even what channel the television stayed on. "Chike, let it happen," he would say. "She's just helping out. You should be grateful." The manipulation wasn't just emotional, it was physical. They were slowly erasing Amara's presence from her own home. Her framed photos were replaced with Onika's, the so-called good village girl, and though Amara had not yet seen her, she could feel her presence being prepared like a throne for a queen yet to arrive. Amara was being phased out, and though her lips remained silent, her heart was beginning to sharpen. She had not fought for this marriage to become invisible in it. She would not let them push her into the shadows of a home she built. The day Onika arrived was sunny, ironic for the kind of storm she brought. Amara had just returned from a hospital appointment, not for pregnancy, but to finally confront the truth behind her and Chike's long years of infertility. The results had confirmed her worst suspicion. The problem was not her. It was Chike. He had a low sperm count, almost negligible. Amara had held the paper in her trembling hands, staring at it in the parking lot, her breath caught between relief and rage. But before she could process her emotions, a noise from the front gate jolted her as she pulled into the compound. She stepped out of the car and saw a taxi unloading bags, heavy Gonna-must-go bags, a nylon sack of yams, a box of kitchen utensils. And standing proudly beside them, in a tight-fitting wrapper and net blouse, was Onika. Young, round-faced, and smug, she looked Amara up and down like she was a guest. "You must be the madam," she said, adjusting her head tie. "Mama Chike said I should make myself comfortable." She didn't wait for a response. She picked up her handbag, strutted past Amara, and walked straight into the house. Just like that, Amara stood frozen. She didn't move, didn't speak. She watched as Onika's hips swayed arrogantly down the hallway and into the living room. Mama Chike emerged from the kitchen with a loud squeal. "My daughter." "Finally," she cried, hugging Onika like a long-lost child. "This is the kind of woman I've been praying for. See her hips, her color, her humility." Amara walked in slowly, her heels echoing on the tiled floor. She looked at her husband, sitting on the sofa, arms folded, refusing to meet her eyes. "Chike," she said, voice trembling, "what is this?" Chike stood slowly, looking anywhere but at her. "Mama said, look, we need a woman who can give us children, Amara. You've tried, but it's time we face facts." Amara laughed bitterly, holding up the medical report. "Is that a fact? Then maybe you should read this before parading your shame around." Mama Chike snatched the paper, squinting at the results, but she tossed it aside with a hiss. "Doctors lie. I've seen barren women blame men before. Don't bring that madness here." Onika stood smugly in the corner, already slipping off her heels like she belonged. "I'm here to stay," she whispered. "Better get used to it." That night Amara packed her things, not to leave, but to remove herself emotionally. She moved her files, her documents, and everything important into a private locked cabinet in the study. She stared at the house, her house, now crawling with betrayal and strangers. The walls felt narrower, the air thicker. But she didn't cry. Not that night. Not anymore. She lay in bed alone, her back turned from the empty pillow where Chaik once slept, and she stared at the ceiling until morning. The only thing louder than her heartbeat was the vow she made to herself. I will not be the victim in this story. I will not be driven out of what I built. And when I strike, it will not be with tears. It will be with fire. Morning came with the scent of okra soup and a side of disrespect. Onika was in the kitchen, wearing Amara's apron, instructing the house help on how to season Chaik's food. When Amara entered, the staff gave her a nervous glance. "Madam, good morning," the housekeeper whispered, almost ashamed. Onika didn't flinch. "Morning," she replied casually, sipping pap from Amara's favorite mug. "I hope you don't mind. I like to cook early for my man." The venom was thick, but Amara said nothing. She walked to the fridge, opened it, and stood there for a full minute, steadying her breath. She closed it gently, turned, and walked out. But inside a fire raged. Onika's presence was no longer temporary. It was permanent, brazen, uninvited. She slept in the master bedroom now, while Amara remained in the corner room, reduced to a ghost in her own mansion. The staff were confused, the neighbors curious, and Chaik indifferent. And Mama Chaik? She smiled like a queen who had finally deposed the false ruler. Onika wasted no time asserting herself. She wore silk wrappers and tight tops around the house, leaving her perfumes and cosmetics on the vanity that once belonged to Amara. She answered the gate when deliveries came. She introduced herself as Madam Onika to visitors. And when Amara returned from work each day, Onika would be lounging in the parlor with Chaik, laughing at shows and sipping juice like she had earned the right. One evening, as Amara approached the gate, she heard Onika's voice through the window. "I don't know how you manage her for so long. No wonder she has no child. Always carrying file up and down. Me, I'm here to build a family." Laughter followed, Chaik's. Amara stopped in her tracks. She turned around, walked to the back garden, and sat down on the cold pavement. For the first time in weeks, she cried, not because of the insult, but because the man she once prayed for had become the architect of her humiliation. But while they mocked, Amara planned. She copied Chaik's medical results into multiple hard copies. She contacted her doctor friend and asked him to keep watch on Onika's sudden pregnancy claims. She reviewed the land papers again, made backup scans, and gave her lawyer instructions on what to do if anything happened to her. Amara moved like a shadow now, quiet but watchful. And while they laughed, paraded, and mocked her, she sharpened her silence into a sword. They had declared war and expected her to cry. But what they didn't know, what they would soon regret, was that Amara wasn't crying anymore. She was calculating. Dignity she fought hard to preserve. Even the staff had begun to shift loyalty. The cook started serving Onika's meals first. The cleaner began calling her Madam Onika. The gatekeeper once called Amara Auntie by mistake, and the pain that followed felt like a bullet. Amara said nothing, but the sting remained. Onika, on the other hand, reveled in it. She would walk around the house in silk robes and ankara gowns that accentuated her curves, rubbing her flat stomach and saying things like, "Soon there will be a child running around this house, a real heir." Chaik would smile like a fool, calling her my queen, while ignoring Amara's presence completely. It was not just betrayal, it was entitlement. And Mama Chaik only added fuel to the fire. One afternoon, while guests were visiting, she openly introduced Onika as the woman carrying my first grandchild. The applause was thunderous. Amara stood at the stairs, watching them toast to a lie. Her hands were clenched. Her heart throbbed. But she smiled, the kind of smile that precedes war. A smile made not of joy, but strategy. That same week, Amara went to see her doctor friend, Dr. Halima, a quiet, brilliant woman who had helped Amara with health screenings for years. "Are you sure Onika's pregnant?" Amara asked, her voice tight. Dr. Halima sighed, folded her arms, and said, "She forged it. The test result is a manipulated photocopy. I checked her name in the system. There's no record. Not even an appointment. She's faking it, Amara." That night, Amara returned home to see banners outside the gate reading, Congratulations, Chief and Lolo, on your first grandchild. Inside, a celebration was underway. Onika wore a fake baby bump under a flowing gown, dancing in front of cheering relatives. Chike looked drunk with pride. Mama Chike cried tears of joy. But Amara simply watched. She greeted each guest with a gracious smile. No one saw the rage in her eyes, or the truth in her silence. Her enemies had gone too far. And now, the war would not be private. It would be biblical. The day Amara received Chike's fertility report was the day she finally saw the full script of her humiliation and the weapon of her victory. The envelope had been hidden for weeks, gathering dust in the bottom of her office drawer. She hadn't wanted to believe it. But when Dr. Halima confirmed that Onika's pregnancy was fake, Amara knew it was time. She took out the medical report again, this time reading every line like scripture. Oligospermia, low sperm count morphology, irregular, natural conception unlikely. The paper trembled in her hands, not because of fear, but because of power. She photocopied it, encrypted it, stored it in the cloud, printed 5 hard copies, and gave one to Barrister Adalai, her lawyer. Don't release this until I say, she instructed. But when I do, make sure the whole world hears it. Barrister Adalai, a stoic older man, raised his brow. And the house? Amara nodded. They've forgotten who owns it. Let them enjoy the delusion. But when the curtain falls, they'll know who built the stage. Meanwhile, inside the house, the lies continued. Onika would now touch her stomach dramatically, pretending to feel kicks. She'd sit like royalty, complaining of cravings, while Mama Chike fed her and rubbed her feet. The maid brought her footstools. Chike bathed her in adoration. Every night, they called relatives to give testimonies and promised a naming ceremony before the year ended. Amara watched it all like a theater performance, actors dancing on a stage they didn't own. But Amara wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. She had everything: the forged pregnancy test, the fake ultrasound, the report on Chike's infertility, and the land title deed of the house. She had moved the original document to a hidden vault and updated her will to reflect new beneficiaries: her goddaughter, her mother, and her foundation. Chike's name was nowhere near her wealth. The same man who now mocked her would one day find himself homeless in the mansion she paid for, and that day was closer than they imagined. The only thing Amara hadn't planned for was how much it would still hurt. Even in her strength, the pain would sneak in like a shadow. She missed the man she thought she married. She missed being loved without suspicion. But now she had to love herself harder. One night, as Onika and Mama Chike planned a baby shower in the living room, Amara stood by the staircase, dressed in a long white gown, her posture tall, her face unreadable. Madam Amara, the housekeeper said nervously. Do you want to join them? Amara smiled. No, she said. I'm preparing for something else. And when the housekeeper asked what she meant, Amara whispered, their funeral of lies. Onika had fully settled into the mansion, like a queen anointed by the gods. She no longer pretended to be polite. Every room she entered, she walked like it was hers. She had turned the master bedroom into her throne room. Floral curtains replaced Amara's minimalist decor. Amara's framed wedding photos had been discarded, and new portraits of Chike and Onika in matching Ankara outfits now adorned the hallway. Chike had become an accomplice, not just a passive participant. He funded every whim: shopping sprees, spa treatments, pregnancy supplements, and even designer maternity gowns for a baby that didn't exist. Mama Chike? She danced through the compound like she had won a war, calling Onika her barren redeemer. The worst part wasn't just their takeover. It was the way they paraded it. Onika began organizing women's prayer meetings in the house, gatherings that had once been Amara's spiritual safe space. Women from the church came, prayed for her fake pregnancy, and praised her humility. Amara would sit quietly upstairs, listening to them shout hallelujahs over a lie, her eyes dry but her soul boiling. The humiliation extended beyond the gates. In the community, whispers spread like harmattan fire. People no longer greeted Amara with honor. Some looked at her with pity, others with mockery. That's the one, they say, her husband took another wife because she couldn't give him a child. she once overheard at the salon. Even some clients, who once respected her in business settings, now gave her subtle looks of judgment. "We didn't know you were going through so much at home," one woman said, her voice laced with pity disguised as sympathy. But Amara never broke character. She smiled. She laughed when required. She continued to sign contracts, pay staff salaries, fund outreach programs, and expand her company's operations. But every time she entered the house, her house, the weight of betrayal greeted her like a cold wind. The very people she fed, clothed, and protected now treated her like excess baggage. And yet, Amara's resolve didn't crack. She knew power wasn't in shouting, nor in confrontation. Power was in owning the land they danced on, and letting them forget that until it was too late. One Thursday morning, while Amara was on a business call in the living room, Onika came downstairs wearing a flamboyant red lace gown. "Amara," she called out sweetly, "we have a little issue. There's a gathering coming up, a women's brunch, and since I'm the one carrying the family's future, I need you to move your things out of the master wardrobe. It's getting cramped." Amara paused her call, looked up slowly, and smiled. "Sure," she said. "Take all the space you need." She stood, walked to the staircase, and climbed without looking back. Onika blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. But she didn't realize that Amara had already emptied the safe. Her documents were gone. Her weapons were hidden. Her exit wasn't surrender, it was setup. And when the door finally slammed, it wouldn't be Amara walking out. It would be all of them. The house was no longer a home, but a carefully disguised prison. One evening, Amara walked into the dining room to pour herself a glass of water and overheard Mama Chaik on a video call with her sisters. "This woman is still here, oh," she said with irritation. "She's holding on like she has a stake in this family. She's lucky we haven't chased her out yet." Her voice was loud, proud, and venomous. What kind of wife doesn't know how to make her husband happy? Always pressing laptop. Always talking contract. Now God has sent us Onika to restore this family's glory. Laughter erupted from the phone speaker. Amara stood still, clutching the glass. Not because of the insult, she had heard worse, but because of the arrogance. These women spoke as though she was a squatter, as if she hadn't paid for the very tiles they were stepping on, as if her money wasn't funding the comfort they now used to torment her. Amara placed the glass down gently, walked to the back door, and stood under the sky. The stars blinked above, silent witnesses to her pain. "Let them laugh," she whispered. "Let them build their altars of pride. I will be the thunder that topples it." Mama Chaik wasn't done. The next day, during breakfast, she turned to Amara with a smirk. "You know, my daughter, I hear Onika wants to name the baby after my late husband. She said she'll call the child Papa Chaik Jr." Amara didn't respond. She was sipping tea calmly, dressed in a crisp blouse and Ankara skirt. "I just thank God for Onika," Mama Chaik continued. "She's everything you failed to be, fertile, respectful, humble." Chaik chuckled as he scrolled through his phone. "We finally have peace in this house," he added. "Real peace." Amara nodded slowly. "Peace is a beautiful thing," she said. "But sometimes it comes before a storm." They didn't catch the warning in her tone. They had gotten too drunk on delusion, too sure that Amara had been silenced. They didn't know she was letting them hang themselves with the very rope she handed them. That weekend, Mama Chaik called for a traditional marriage introduction. Amara was not invited. She overheard the planning from the hallway. The caterer was booked. The family elders were called. The local MC was already cracking jokes over the phone. Chaik and Onika laughed as they browsed engagement attires. Mama Chaik paced the parlor with excitement, shouting instructions at the maid. Amara, however, sat in her study. She opened a brown envelope containing Onika's forged pregnancy report, Chaik's fertility diagnosis, and the deed of the house. She flipped through them slowly, like one rehearsing lines before a courtroom drama. Her face was calm, her eyes cold. She had chosen her date. She had prepared the scene. And when the curtain rose, she would speak only once. And that one speech would destroy everything they thought they owned. The marriage ceremony was held in full fanfare. The compound buzzed with guests, music, and masqueraded foolishness. Women danced with wrappers tied tight. Men sprayed cash as Onika danced in circles, her waist moving like she was born to seduce the world. She wore a heavily beaded blouse with a flowing skirt, and fake baby bump discreetly tied under layers of fabric. Chaik wore a matching igbada with gold embroidery, grinning like a man-crowned king. Mama Chaik wept tears of joy. Finally, she cried, "This is the kind of wife I prayed for. A true daughter of our people." Amara stood upstairs, dressed in a modest gown, watching the chaos through a narrow window. Guests didn't know she was still in the house. Some even asked, "Where's the ex-wife? Has she moved out?" Others whispered, "I heard she's mad." Still living there. But Amara watched in silence, drinking every humiliation like bitter wine. She recorded clips on her phone, took photos of Onika dancing with her baby bump, even took screenshots of the event livestream. Not for evidence, but for documentation. Every lie must have its record. Every shame must have its receipt. Later that night, Amara stood by the kitchen while the staff cleaned up. Her name wasn't mentioned. Her presence wasn't acknowledged. She walked to the backyard and found Onika there, still in her lace, smoking a stick of weed. "You watched everything, didn't you?" Onika asked, not looking up. Amara didn't respond. Onika chuckled. "You could have fought. You could have screamed. But you're too weak. That's why I won. This house was never yours. Not the man. Not the family. And now not even the name." Amara stepped forward, her face inches from Onika's. "You're right," she said. "You won something. But it wasn't me you beat. It was the truth. And the thing about truth is, it doesn't lose. It just waits." She walked away, leaving Onika in silence. That night, Amara didn't cry. She slept peacefully, her hands over her chest, knowing that when she rose, the next step would be destruction. And she would do it with dignity. The next morning, Mama Chaik stormed into Amara's room. "Why are you still here? Can't you see the new wife has taken over? This house isn't yours. Stop embarrassing yourself." Amara folded her clothes into a small suitcase and calmly replied, "You're right. I'll leave when it's time." Mama Chaik scoffed. "What time? You think you're still relevant? You think you'll carry your barren shame and stay here forever?" Amara stood, walked to the door, and whispered, "No, not forever. Just long enough to watch the lie collapse." Then she locked her door. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and drafted the email that would call for the meeting, the one that would gather everyone in one room. Elders, family, community, witnesses. She wanted them all to be present when the mask came off. Amara was done surviving. Now she would start destroying. It began with a knock on the door, not gentle, but loud and purposeful. Amara had barely gotten out of bed when the housekeeper, eyes wide with nervousness, stepped in. "Madam, they said you should come downstairs." "They're waiting." Confused, Amara wrapped her robe around her and walked toward the staircase, already hearing the chatter of relatives and strangers. As she descended, she was greeted by a circle of chairs in the living room. Chaik sat at the head like a judge. Beside him sat Mama Chaik, face stern and triumphant. Onika, dressed in a flowing green gown, sat with her hand on her swollen fake belly, looking like a triumphant goddess. Amara didn't understand at first. Her heart pounded as the relatives greeted her coldly, and the atmosphere chilled her to the bone. Then Chaik stood. "We called this meeting," he said, "to bring peace to this house. But peace cannot dwell where there's bitterness and barrenness." Amara blinked. Did he just say that in front of a crowd? Her voice caught in her throat, but before she could speak, Mama Chaik rose. "This woman has stayed here long enough. She has refused to give my son peace. She has blocked our lineage from growing. Onika is now carrying our legacy. We want her to take her rightful place." The room buzzed. A few murmured, some nodded in agreement, but Amara remained frozen. Onika smirked, rubbing her belly like she had just won a grand prize. "It's not personal," she said sweetly. "But this house needs joy, not bitterness." That sentence finally broke the dam. "Joy?" Amara asked, stepping forward slowly. You all sit in this house, my house, and talk to me like I'm a stranger? She looked at Chike. This is the woman you're replacing me with? Based on a belly and a lie. Chike scoffed. Enough of the madness. You're bitter because you failed. You gave me nothing, not even peace of mind. Amara swallowed hard. The pain was sharp, thick, and choking. But she refused to cry. So what do you want? She asked, her voice low. Mama Chike pointed to the door. Leave. You've overstayed your welcome. At that moment, the betrayal became real. Not just whispers, not just mockery. This was rejection. Final. Public. Legal. Her husband, the man she built with, the family she had fed, the roof she had paid for, had all turned against her like a pack of wolves. And yet, she didn't scream. She didn't beg. She walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and returned with her head high. This house may no longer welcome me, she said, but the truth will never forget me. And it doesn't need welcome, it only needs time. Outside, the neighbors watched, some with pity, others with glee. The sight of Amara carrying her suitcase down the stairs of the very house she built sent murmurs across the street. She didn't say a word. She got into her car and drove off, leaving behind echoes of judgment and whispers of defeat. But inside that car, she wasn't broken. She was boiling, not with sadness, but with preparation. Every moment of that day was burned into her memory. Every insult, every cheer, every smirk. She would not forget. She would not forgive. And she would never let them rise again from what she was about to do. Enjoy your victory, she whispered as she drove. Because when I return, I will return like a storm. Back in her apartment on the other side of town, Amara sat cross-legged in her sparse sitting room. It wasn't luxury like the mansion she had paid for. It was small, modest, but peaceful. And peace was all she needed to focus. The windows were open, letting in a late evening breeze, and across her lap were the copies of every document she had carefully preserved. Her lawyer's certified house deed, Chike's fertility report, Onika's forged pregnancy test, and most importantly, the medical statement from Dr. Halima proving Onika had never been a registered antenatal patient at her hospital. Amara placed the forged test result beside the real lab report Dr. Halima had given her. The difference was clear: different stamp color, different signature, and a fake serial number. Onika had used a forged slip from a friend who worked at a nearby clinic and photoshopped Halima's hospital logo on it. Amateur work, but convincing enough for a family desperate to believe. Amara stared at the documents, not with anger, but with satisfaction. Now, the evidence was undeniable. Now the truth had legs, and she would make sure it marched straight into their celebration and burned every illusion to the ground. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Onika's stomach was becoming a source of concern. Your bump hasn't grown, one auntie whispered during a visit. Are you sure the baby is fine? Onika faked a yawn. Some pregnancies are shy. The bump will come. Chike, still too blind, defended her fiercely. Leave her alone. You people want to stress her and risk the baby. Mama Chike, despite her growing doubt, kept up the defense. Not every pregnancy is the same, she'd say, but her voice carried less conviction now. Onika doubled down. She began posting fake scan results online, even going as far as using photos from pregnancy forums to convince people of her journey. But she was unraveling. Her nerves were frayed. One night, while talking to her friend on the phone, Amara's loyal housekeeper, who had secretly remained on Amara's side, overheard Onika say, "Let me just hold on to the naming ceremony. After that, I'll lie about a miscarriage." The housekeeper recorded the conversation and sent the audio straight to Amara. That night, Amara added one more weapon to her growing arsenal. Onika's lies were now no longer just personal. They were documented and damning. Amara called Barrister Adalai the next morning. "I want the meeting scheduled," she said. "Invite the elders. I want the relatives. The same ones who watched me walk out with my bag. I want them seated." Barrister Adalai, a man of few words, simply replied, "Understood." Amara dressed in a wine-colored lace gown, minimal jewelry, and soft makeup. She wasn't going for drama. She was going for destruction. That afternoon, She printed extra copies of all documents, placed them in brown folders, and sealed them. Then she slid them into her handbag and crossed her legs like a queen awaiting her court. The invitation to the family reconciliation meeting was sent to Chaik through the lawyer's office. The topic was framed politely: clarification of legal property and paternity-related disputes. Chaik read it and scoffed. So now she wants to beg, he told Onika. It's too late. I'm the man of this house now. Onika, prideful and clueless, replied, let her come. Let her watch the real queen rise. They didn't know Amara wasn't coming to beg. She was coming to bury them with the truth. The family meeting was set for a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after Amara had been publicly chased from her home. The mansion had been decorated once more. Chaik wore his newest kaftan, a gold-embroidered piece Onika had picked for him at a boutique. She too looked regal, in a soft pink lace with her fake bump heavily wrapped and protruding. Mama Chaik was all smiles, welcoming guests and offering drinks. Most of the relatives who came thought it was going to be a final reconciliation attempt, maybe even a proper blessing of the new marriage. After all, the story they'd been sold was simple. Amara was barren and bitter, while Onika was fruitful and humble. But when Amara arrived in a black SUV, dressed in a navy blue wrapper and blouse with silver studs, everything shifted. She didn't walk in like a woman seeking forgiveness. She walked in like a judge stepping into a courtroom. Behind her came Barrister Adalai, carrying a briefcase. No one greeted them. No one stood. But Amara smiled. Let the games begin, she whispered. The guests took their seats. Chaik folded his arms smugly. Onika rubbed her stomach dramatically. Mama Chaik leaned close to a cousin and said, watch her beg. This is her last act before she vanishes for good. Barrister Adalai stood and addressed the room. We thank you all for honoring this invitation. Madam Amara has requested this meeting to clarify certain legal and medical misunderstandings that have impacted the family structure. Chaik laughed. Legal what? This is a family matter. What are lawyers doing here? Amara turned to him, her smile razor-sharp. Since you made the mockery public, it's only fair that the truth is public too. She opened her bag and began distributing the brown folders. Inside you'll find 3 things: a medical report, a property deed, and a sworn affidavit from a licensed physician. Murmurs began. Confused hands opened folders. Whispers turned to gasps. Mama Chaik flipped through hers, her eyes widening. What is this? She barked. Lies. Amara stood. The fertility report is yours, Chaik. It confirms that you are medically incapable of producing a child naturally. The property deed confirms I am the legal owner of this house. And the affidavit? It confirms that Onika's pregnancy is fake, forged from beginning to end. A heavy silence filled the room. Onika's face drained of color. Chaik's mouth fell open. Mama Chaik stood trembling. The room erupted into chaos. Aunties shouted. Uncles murmured. Some looked away in shame. Others stood in stunned silence. Onika tried to speak, but her voice cracked. It's a lie. She's trying to ruin me. Amara turned to her slowly. You ruined yourself the day you faked motherhood to steal another woman's home. Mama Chaik grabbed Chaik's arm. Say something. Chaik looked like a ghost. All the confidence drained from his face. His hands shook as he picked up the report again. This can't be true. Amara took one final look around the room. You all laughed when I left. You called me barren. You said I was a failure. But the only failure here today is the lie you all chose to believe. And with that, she sat down quietly, her dignity restored, her enemies exposed, and the house trembling under the weight of their disgrace. The days following the bombshell meeting were like living in a crumbling palace. What once felt like victory for Onika quickly turned into panic. Her fake pregnancy, which had once been her crown, now became her curse. Visitors stopped calling. The women who used to rub her belly during prayer meetings now crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. Neighbors whispered behind her back. Some even accused her of being possessed. How can someone fake such a sacred thing? One woman asked at the local salon. Onika tried to deny everything. insisting that Amara had forged the documents, but no one believed her anymore. The scanned images she used online were exposed as internet downloads. Her clinic was proven to be a local chemist shop with no license. Her stories changed daily. One day it was a twin pregnancy, the next it was an ectopic condition. The collapse was public and unforgiving. In trying to climb the ladder through deceit, Onika had slipped and landed in disgrace. Yet she still roamed the house, clinging to denial like a drowning woman clutches driftwood. "The baby is spiritual," she told Chaik one night. "They won't see it on physical scans." But even Chaik had stopped responding. His silence was the beginning of his own descent. Mama Chaik, on the other hand, had gone from pride to paranoia. She stopped dressing up. She no longer greeted neighbors outside the gate. Her world had flipped too fast. The same relatives who danced with her during Onika's marriage now avoided her calls. Her sisters mocked her behind her back. "Your fruitful daughter-in-law is nothing but a fraud," they said. The shame became so unbearable that she started consulting pastors and native doctors, hoping to reverse the curse. But there was no curse, only consequence. And the biggest one of all? The house. The moment it became publicly known that Amara owned the mansion, everything shifted. The household staff who once addressed Onika as Madam quietly started using Ma for Amara again. Deliveries no longer went to Onika's name. Even the driver refused to drive her. Mama Chaik tried to salvage her power by calling a family meeting to challenge the property documents. But when Barrister Adalai arrived and brought the land title again, in Amara's name alone, there was nothing to argue. The room went quiet. "Then why didn't she say anything?" one uncle asked. "Because she was waiting," Barrister Adalai replied. "And now the wait is over." Meanwhile, Amara had not yet returned to live in the house. No, she was letting them stew. She still came and went with full access, of course, but she made it clear she was no longer operating from a place of emotion. She was the landlord, the owner, the queen who needed no throne to prove her rule. She visited once every few days, walking in with her car keys swinging and her chin high. Onika would disappear into her room whenever she arrived. Mama Chaik pretended to sleep. Chaik sat like a statue. On one particular visit, Amara walked into the parlor, opened the windows wide, and said to the maid, "Clean everything, from top to bottom. We're clearing out stale air." It wasn't just about dirt. It was symbolic. She was clearing out years of lies, shame, and abuse. And as the sunlight poured into the house, Amara stood at the center, no longer a wife seeking love. She was a woman who had taken back her power, and this time, she wasn't leaving. Chaik was unraveling. Slowly, publicly, and shamefully. The man who once mocked Amara for being barren and cold was now the laughingstock of the community. At his barbershop, customers whispered. He chased out the woman who made him for a fake pregnancy, someone muttered. At church, the pastor that once blessed his home now prayed publicly against men who dishonor their helper. His friends stopped inviting him out. His phone no longer buzzed with messages. Even business opportunities began to dry up. One of Amara's largest clients, who happened to be a board member at a logistics council, quietly blacklisted Chaik's proposals. It was poetic justice. And it stung more because it didn't come from noise. It came from silence. Amara had not made one post, not granted one interview, not said a word. She had simply let the facts speak, and the truth was louder than scandal. Chaik stayed indoors most days, sulking, trying to drink the guilt away. And Onika? She was now more enemy than ally. She screamed at him daily, called him useless, even accused him of ruining her life. "You're nothing without me," she yelled one night. "You think that barren wife of yours will take you back? She owns everything now. You're a dog sleeping under her roof." Mama Chaik, too, had descended into bitterness. Her health deteriorated. She developed high blood pressure and anxiety. Her prayer altar became a place of panic, not peace. "I was only trying to help you," she kept telling Chaik. "I wanted a grandchild. I didn't know that girl was a witch." But deep down she did. She had chosen Onika because she saw in her a weapon, one she could control. one who would obey her. She thought Amara was too independent, too ambitious, too powerful, forgetting that it was that same strength that had raised Chike from nothing. But the price of her betrayal was heavy. She could no longer walk freely in the neighborhood, without side eyes and sneers. The same women she once hosted for women's fellowship now avoided her completely. Even her fellow elders at church had suspended her from leading prayers until things were clarified. In her bedroom, she stared at the walls, wondering how everything had fallen apart. But the truth was clear. They didn't just break Amara's heart, they tried to bury her. And now, they were choking on the dust of their own lies. Back at the mansion, Amara returned for one final act of transition. She came with 2 realtors and a photographer. She walked the house like an inspector, taking notes. Onika tried to block her path. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. Amara stared at her coldly. "I'm preparing to reclaim what's mine. And soon, you won't even have the right to breathe under this roof." Chike stood at the stairwell, eyes red, voice hoarse. "Amara, please," he muttered. She didn't stop walking. She simply said, "You all made your bed. Lie in it while you still can." The mansion that once hosted Onika's baby shower was now cold, silent, and heavy. Its glory had died the day its rightful queen was thrown out. And now that she had returned, it would never serve traitors again. The final family meeting was called by Amara herself, not out of obligation, but strategy. She sent out formal invitations, stamped with her company logo, and titled the gathering, "Estate Restructuring and Transition Announcement." The relatives came reluctantly, most of them unsure of what to expect. Some came out of curiosity, others out of guilt. They all gathered in the same living room where Amara had once been humiliated. Only now it was spotless, freshly painted, and every photograph on the wall featured Amara alone. Gone were the portraits of Chike and Onika. Gone were the plastic trophies of fake joy. Chike sat quietly in the corner, no longer a husband, just a tenant waiting for judgment. Mama Chike refused to come down. Onika stayed locked in her room. Amara stood before the gathering, poised, composed, and surrounded by legal documents. Barrister Adalai sat beside her. She cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to finalize." Gasps rippled through the room as she began reading aloud. "This house, located at Plot 27, Alumide Crescent, was purchased solely under my name in 2016. It has remained under my ownership since then. All bills, taxes, renovations, and maintenance have been paid from my personal income. The land certificate is stamped and notarized. The building plans, utility receipts, and mortgage clearance are all here." She paused. No one spoke. "Furthermore," she continued, "I am restructuring my estate. This property will now be listed for sale. All occupants must vacate within 10 business days." The silence was thunderous. One elderly uncle whispered, "What about Chike?" Amara turned to him with steel in her voice. "What about him? The man who threw his wife out for a fake pregnancy? The man who mocked me as barren while hiding his medical reality?" She held up the fertility report. "I was never the problem. He was. But none of you cared to ask." She turned to the others. "You all watched them destroy me, and now you'll watch me rebuild without them." There was no applause, just stunned silence. Chike tried to rise, his voice barely audible. "Please, Amara, don't do this." Amara's eyes didn't blink. "You already did it. I'm just cleaning up." She turned to Barrister Adalai. "Issue them official notices today. By morning, locks must be changed and Onika must go." The room remained still as she walked out, heels clicking, dignity intact. She had come back not for revenge, but for resolution. And now, there was nothing left to say. The queen had reclaimed her throne, not by begging, not by crying, but by simply remembering who she was. The eviction notices were served by 9:15 a.m. sharp. Barrister Adalai, flanked by a court officer and a security team, arrived at the gate and requested all non-legal occupants of the property to prepare for immediate ejection. The gatekeeper, once loyal to Mama Chike, now bowed low and opened the gates without resistance. Inside, the compound stirred like a disturbed anthill. Onika stormed out of the house barefoot, hair unkempt, wrapper half-tied, shouting at the top of her voice, "What nonsense is this? This is my husband's house. I am pregnant." The court officer didn't blink. "Madam, you are not on the deed. This house belongs to Mrs. Amarachi Chinidu, legally and fully. You must vacate." She turned to Chaik, who was pacing in his boxers, sweating like a cornered animal. "Chaik, do something. Say something," she screamed. But Chaik stood frozen. He hadn't slept in days. His pride had cracked, and now his entire world was crumbling. "Amara," he finally muttered, "please not like this." But Amara didn't respond. She sat in the back seat of her SUV, parked by the gate, windows rolled down, watching him scatter. Calm, collected, cold. Inside the house, Mama Chaik was on her knees, begging the housekeeper to help her gather her things. "This is a mistake. It's all a mistake. My son was confused," she wailed. The housekeeper, who had once endured her insults, now moved past her without a word. She packed Amara's original belongings back into the master bedroom. Her throw pillows, her scented candles, her framed certificates, even her father's old Bible. Every trace of Amara was restored like a returning crown. Meanwhile, Onika tried to call her family for help, but no one picked up. The girl who had once boasted publicly about her pregnancy was now exposed, empty, and disgracefully irrelevant. Neighbors stood by their balconies, watching the chaos unfold like a live movie. Some cheered. Others recorded. One woman whispered, "Justice finally came home." The same crowd that had clapped when Amara was thrown out now watched silently as her enemies were dragged out by legal force. Poetic justice had never looked this beautiful. As Onika's final box was thrown into the compound, Amara finally stepped out of the car. She wore a fitted royal blue gown, her natural hair pulled back into a bun, face bare but glowing. She walked slowly, confidently, heels clicking on the tiles she had paid for, toward the center of the compound. She stopped beside Onika and Chaik, who stood like beggars under the weight of shame. "You said I was barren," she said, looking straight into Chaik's eyes. "You said I was worthless. You let them throw me out like garbage. But look at you now, what do you have?" Chaik fell to his knees. "Please, Amara, forgive me. I was lost. I was manipulated." Amara's eyes were sharp. "You weren't lost. You were willing." She turned to Onika. "You wanted to take my life. You can have the shame instead." And with that, she walked back into her house. And this time, she locked the gate behind her. 3 months later, the mansion stood tall and quiet, freshly painted, newly furnished, and finally at peace. Amara now lived alone, not in sorrow, but in restoration. She had transformed the house into a sanctuary of strength, beauty, and memory. The master bedroom had been redesigned with cream curtains, art pieces from her travels, and a full bookshelf of legal and business journals. She hosted business clients and women's empowerment workshops from her home office. The staff were loyal. The air smelled of lemon-scented polish and clean beginnings. But most of all, the house respected her now. It no longer echoed with mockery or false laughter. It no longer carried the scent of betrayal. It was hers again, not just by law, but by energy. The silence no longer hurt. It healed. She often stood by the balcony at sunset, watching the street glow gold, sipping tea with a soft smile. She had survived the worst. She had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had turned the very stage of her humiliation into her empire. Chaik, meanwhile, had fallen into complete ruin. Without Amara's money, his business deals collapsed. Investors pulled out. His car was repossessed. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in the slums of Gudu, surviving on borrowed funds and the leftover pity of old friends. Mama Chaik moved back to the village after selling her jewelry to cover hospital bills. She never recovered from the disgrace. Onika vanished. Some say she relocated to another city. Others say she returned to her old boyfriend, carrying nothing but bitterness and shame. None of them ever regained their footing. Amara didn't block their numbers. She didn't need to. They stopped calling. No one dared to face the woman they once betrayed. Rumors swirled about how she had become untouchable, dangerous, powerful. But she wasn't any of those things. She had simply decided, never again will I beg to be respected in a house I paid for. She had grown. And this time, there was no going back. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light over her compound, Amara walked barefoot across the marble floor, humming softly. Her lawyer had just emailed her the final payment from the sale of another property she had acquired while they mocked her. She picked up her phone, looked at an old photo of her and Chike from their wedding day, then deleted it forever. No tears. No nostalgia. Only release. She stepped outside, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "This is what peace feels like." As the sky turned purple, a soft wind blew through the compound, and for the first time in years, Amara felt truly home. Not just in the building, but in herself. She had been betrayed, humiliated, kicked out, and mocked. But she had risen, rebuilt, and reclaimed everything with power, poise, and silence. And when the dust finally settled, there was only one truth left standing. The wife was never the victim. She was the silent owner all along. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.